Welcome to another episode of Witty CFB. This week, we're going to be talking about the ACC, particularly how the conference championship game turns out, as well as previewing Miami versus Syracuse, as well as SMU versus UCal, and also being able to dive into some hypothetical scenarios in terms of what happens in the ACC, depending on how these games turn out, as well as Clemson versus South Carolina too. There is a slight chance that if Clemson beats South Carolina this weekend and Miami were to lose, that possibly could be shaken up too. But on the show we have a repeat guest here, Michael McGruder, lifelong Miami fan, and dude, it's great to have you on the show, and I'm really excited we're able to make this happen again.
Thank you for having me back. When you let me know about it, I was very excited to come back. I can always talk about it.
Awesome. Yeah. So we on our last episode, which was about last month, and we talked about this off camera too. I mean, for Miami to even be in this situation too, for the defensive struggles that they've had this season too, it's definitely a testament to a lot of the adversity that they've faced. And going to this game, they're playing a really tough 8-3 Syracuse team that, quite frankly, really has nothing to lose under first year coach Fran Brown too. And Kyle McCord, he's a dog. He's something special. He knows how to air it out. He knows how to extend plays, and he's a brilliant leader for them too. So, with that said, you're looking at this Miami team, and really all they have to do right now is take care of business, and you're more than likely going to be a top four team with home field advantage the whole way. So, what does Miami specifically need to do in order to take care of Syracuse and be where they should be in terms of this college football playoff and winning the ACC title if they presumably play SMU?
They need to take care of the ball. They need to put pressure on the quarterback, and they need to stop the run. There's no secret that Miami's Achilles heel right now is that defense, and they're still prone to giving up big plays. They can make a couple big plays. We saw the Mish Powell pick 6 against Wake Forest last week. That was a surprise a little bit. Usually teams will just march down the field and bleed you dry if they hold onto the ball and keep it out of Cam Ward's hands. Right now, that's kind of the best defense against Cam Ward. So holding on to the ball and protecting is going to be a very crucial thing. Right now, in my previous viewings of the team, it feels like Miami is looking for the home run ball a lot right now and not working their way to it. They're starting to find their legs in the ground game a little bit more. Blake Martinez has certainly come a long way this year and helping take some pressure off of Cam Ward, and that's been good to see. But really, the defense is the main talking point. Having Ruben Bain back now for a couple weeks has helped. I think he got a sack last game, which is a great thing to see for such a talented player. But Miami hasn't played Syracuse in 22 years. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, this Miami team has a special way about them, but there's also 5-7 years ago, they were undefeated heading into a Pitt game after Thanksgiving. No one in the crowd. It should have been normal for Miami to see no one in the crowd. They do it every home game. And to just fall apart in such a way, it was a very painful thing. And so at this point, as a jaded Miami fan a little bit, I won't believe it till I see it.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good way to put it too, right? I mean, you can even preview the beginning of the season in the sense of there were a lot of sort of comeback wins where Cam Ward sort of had to pretty much play hero ball and essentially, put them in situations in order for them to win too. But you look at their past couple wins. I mean, you think about Duke, you think about Wake Forest, and obviously the loss versus Georgia Tech. And we talked about this a little bit off camera too. But what do you think Miami learned about themselves in terms of the Georgia Tech loss, and what do you think that could be translatable towards their run with the ACC Championship and all of that too? Because I mean, I would argue too that in some ways it was almost good for them that they got the loss, in the sense of, hey, it takes a little bit less pressure off of them. You don't have to necessarily have this undefeated streak. And I think Georgia Tech's a lot more respectable than people give them credit for. I mean, Brent Key has knocked off a lot of top 25 teams too, and that often gets overlooked, especially when you think about how much Georgia Tech ran and how Haynes King essentially wasn't really healthy at all for that game.
It was painful. It was a painful Georgia Tech game because you just kept waiting. They'd given you hope all year, Miami had, of comeback victories and heroics, and you were just waiting for it. Miami got the ball with 1:40 to go. That's prime Cam Ward time. And he just got a little pressure trying to make a big play. And instead of throwing it away or dumping it off, and he got strip sacked, and it was a killer. And I like what you said there. Does it relieve some of the pressure? In some ways, yes. In some ways, it ratchets the pressure up because they know the expectation of this team. Miami hasn't won in the ACC since they joined. Right? You see SMU already in there with a former Miami offensive coordinator as the head coach, by the way. And it's a little frustrating, disappointing that Miami's only played for one ACC championship in this time. Now, they also know that they have the pressure, and it's a good kind of pressure. They know, all right, we can't take anything for granted anymore. There's no taking plays off. There's no looking at film. We have an expectation that we have to follow through on. Like they've said it in the U documentaries, there is a standard at the University of Miami to uphold. All of those previous players wore the same jersey you do, and there's an expectation that you go out and you win. And it's time for these players to do that.
Yeah, and it's great you talked about tradition too, because I mean, I don't want to jump too far forward, but you have the Catholic versus Convicts rivalry that's going to be starting out 2025, which I'm super excited for too. And then when you just think about the tradition in terms of, Miami in general, I mean, obviously Mario Cristobal, is with Miami to I'm pretty sure he's alum. He's alumni.
Yes.
That's an
He
alma
won 2
mater, right?
national
Yeah.
championships.
Yeah. So that's what I figured there. And then before that, they had Mark Reich before
And Manny Diaz between them.
and Manny Diaz. Two great coaches, and definitely well respected. But it definitely feels fitting in a sense that Cristobal is kind of in this moment, and in many ways that's why they brought him in too, right? Because they spent a lot of money in terms of NIL and the transfer portal and all of that good stuff too. So we talked about Miami and some of the pros and the cons that we've seen that from them too. So I think it would be best to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about this SMU versus UCal matchup here. And I know obviously you don't generally cover SMU too much, but you gotta have to think to yourself they're going to be on your radar a little bit if they do end up playing the ACC title game. So what have you seen from SMU, whether it's highlights or games that you've watched that could potentially make you nervous in terms of of SMU and Miami matchup?
Oh, I tell you what, I've kept an eye on SMU all year because, like I said, Rhett Lashley is a former Miami offensive coordinator. Heck, he's the best one they've had in a while when he gets the season he got out of Tyler Van Dyke in his freshman year. And we kind of saw how that tailed off in the last few years of him now. And so we knew the offense would be good at SMU. And he made the switch over to, I believe it's Jefferson is the name of the new quarterback.
Yeah, Kevin Jefferson, and they got
Kevin Jefferson. And they've done a great job for him in spreading the ball around. He's got about 2,500 passing yards, I want to say, 17 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. But they're also running it. They have a 1,000-yard rusher in Brashad Smith. They have 6 wide receivers with 20 catches, but no one's got more than 29. They have no 500-yard receivers, but 8 guys have more than 200. So they've been playing very complimentary, very team football in terms of making sure that there's no hyper fixation on one player. And so it's been good to see. And the defense is playing very well, especially in the ACC, where I believe they're second in yards allowed per game and first or second in points per game at 21. So they're playing very good complementary football on both sides of the ball, and it's led to them being the highest ranked they've been since 1985 before they got banned. So it's been good to see a resurgence of SMU. I think them switching from the Big 12 to the ACC was a great fit for them in terms of both the level of competition as well as kind of what it allows them to do.
Yeah, and you made a really good point too about, I think in many ways what's going to be fun about a potential Miami SMU matchup in the ACC Championship is just the amount of history that both these programs have, especially when you think about the late 80s, particularly with SMU. And I remember watching that Pony Express documentary and how fascinating that was, especially as someone who never grew up during that era, but just generally just being just appreciating college football, being able to and be able to know the X's and O's with that too. And then when you think about SMU, and they have a really strong defensive line too, especially if you watched any of the Virginia game too. They created absolute chaos there too. And the SMU UCal matchup, I mean, UCal is definitely one of the better defenses in the ACC, particularly
Absolutely.
particularly their secondary too, because they're going to disguise coverages, and Fernando Mendoza, he led a comeback for Stanford this weekend too, which, by the way, for those listening, definitely highly recommend watching his after game interview on ESPN too, because he was all teary eyed and everything. So that was so much fun to watch too. And if you had your own crystal ball right now, and you kind of say to yourself, do you foresee Miami and SMU both taking care of business this weekend, or you think there's any possible scenario that one of them could get upsetted or Clemson somehow wins? Because one of the things I thought to myself, I don't think this is going to happen. This is just more of just a fun scenario to think of. What would happen if Miami, SMU, and Clemson all lost? Not necessarily in terms of the ACC picture, because I think in terms of the ACC picture, it would still be SMU versus Miami, right?
Correct.
I think it still would be, but it just in terms of the momentum that both these teams would have going into it.
Correct. If Miami loses and Clemson wins, Clemson jumps them as the only way. And boy, I bet that rivalry in South Carolina this weekend is going to be fantastic environment. I mean, families are divided right now with that, so that will be a fun game to watch, especially because Clemson has one of their losses was to Georgia, who was beating the crap out of most people, and so that was a tough game to judge their precipitous fall at the beginning of the year, and then they came out and they started smashing everyone they played to show that was a fluke. And so it's been interesting to see. I know they had a hiccup their last couple weeks. Not that I'm disappointed. I think Clemson's been bullies in the ACC for quite a while. So I wasn't too disappointed in that. But I think there's a real chance like Cal can pull an upset. I mean, they played Miami very tight. And it's those weeks where you start looking at it and you start saying, oh, we'll just take care of business here, and we're in the ACC Championship game. We don't have to think about it. And that can't be the case for Miami. SMU's already in, but if they want their playoff hopes to survive, I think they have to win this weekend.
And it's good that you mentioned Syracuse, the Syracuse game again too, because I get that they're on the road and everything, but at the same time, there's so much history with Syracuse too, and I still gripe with the whole Syracuse playing in a dome sort of thing. Especially when you look back and you say,
why take away that home field advantage built into the cold?
Yeah, that's what I was almost thinking that to myself too. But regardless, I'm still really excited about it too. So, with that said, I mean, we talked about SMU, we talked about the hypothetical with Clemson too, and let's say Miami and SMU and end up playing, and let's say Miami wins the game and they're in the fourth seed. Have you thought about it all in terms of any intriguing matchups that you can possibly see come out of the college football playoff if they were to end up being the number 4 seed?
Well, let's start here with the ACC Championship game. I feel like there's an opportunity if both teams play each other close and it's a top 10 game and it comes down to a last play or something like that. I feel like there's an opportunity for both teams to make the college football playoff, depending on how other conference championship games go. So it's certainly not out of the realm of the possibility for a 2-loss ACC team to make it. They should definitely make it over a 4-loss SEC team if Texas A&M somehow pulls it off. So it feels like it could be an interesting scenario to play out. Not that I want to look too far ahead, but are there certain teams that I would like for my team to match up with? Sure. I think a Cam Ward versus Ashton Genty game would be fantastic to watch. There are a few teams that I feel like could match up pretty tough. Indiana, Miami could be an interesting one. Who else could there be? Let's see. I don't especially look forward to a Penn State game. I feel like their defense is pretty solid and could give Miami some trouble, but I haven't been overwhelmingly impressed by Drew Aller this year. So it could lead to an interesting game where strength on strength versus weakness on weakness, and that could be another fantastic one. But for now, let's just get in.
Exactly too, and we talked about this too, just how gritty those teams like Syracuse and University of Cal is too, and I think it's one of the reasons too why I wanted to bring you on was because the ACC is such a fun conference too, in the sense that we were talking even just last month too and saying, hey, we were talking about University of Pittsburgh, we were talking about Clemson, and bringing all this together. And now for it to be in this particular moment, we'll see if SMU takes care of business versus UCal, and we'll definitely see how Miami fares in terms of Syracuse and building that momentum for the ACC Championship game. So Michael, I appreciate you being generous to your time being on, and definitely tune in 3:30 ESPN for both those games.
I'll be there.